The initial call was at daybreak on September 28, 1982. A 12-year-old girl in Elk Grove Village, Illinois, woke up with a sore throat. Her parents did nothing more than millions of other families do each and every day. They opened the medicine cabinet and gave her a dose of a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, aka NSAID, in the form of an extra-strength Tylenol capsule. Mary Kellerman was dead in a few hours. Physicians were left guessing, and before the physicians could come to terms with what to do with the sudden death of the victim, other victims started falling down in Chicago area after using the same trusted brand. Following the end of the day, panic had a brand, and it was contained within America's most popular painkiller. The Tylenol murders has commenced. Officials soon came to realize that this was no medical aberration. This was purposeful poisoning. Investigators found out that the stock of Tylenol capsules had been contaminated with potassium cyanide, a chemical that could kill by simply depriving the body of oxygen within minutes by its tiny doses. When members of law enforcement opened the bottles that they found, there was a bitter aroma of almonds, the calling card of cyanide. The victims had done nothing more than go by the word on a product that is based on trust. Within just a day that faith was broken, 7 were dead at the weekend. Their experience became a nightmare in the country as it appeared in every evening news. Mary Kellerman was only 12. There were Adam Janus, a 27-year-old postal worker who collapsed after taking Tylenol, and his brother Stanley and sister-in-law Teresa, who also took capsules out of the same bottle as they mourned him. 3 lives in one family lost in less than 24 hours. There was Mary McFarland, a 31-year-old worker in a telephone company. There was Mary Reiner, 27, a young mother who recently had given birth. There was Paula Prince, a 35-year-old flight attendant in United Airlines, who was caught in a spooky installment picture in the security area when she bought the final bottle of Tylenol she was ever to consume. The normalest deaths in the most normal way. The next logical question that detectives had to ask was where the poison had slipped in the supply chain. Was it the factory or a saboteur at yesterday? Lab tests and distribution maps were indicative of a chilling conclusion. The cyanide was likely added after the bottles had been shipped off to stores already. Somebody had slipped through the packets, stuffed capsules with some poison substance, and put the bottles back on the shelves so that they could fall into the hands of ignorant people. The assassin did not require a research facility and a mammoth conspiracy and a tunnel system. They only needed some time and a bottle of poison and the access to some local pharmacies. Fear accelerated more than investigation as the number of the bodies increased. Parents denied their children medicine. People disposed of their capsules in the rubbish bins. The pharmacies established help desks to exchange the products, and city officials advised people not to panic, but the medical examiners advised all the people to avoid using Tylenol. This was made worse by the randomness of it. It could be anyone next but you, a mother, a child, a worker during a break, a passenger that is going to board a plane. Terror was on every drug stand in America. The next step became a turning point of corporate management of crisis. Tylenol Benevolence Johnson & Johnson, the producer of Tylenol, took a cognitive leap that astonished the stock market but salvaged its image. Rather than diminishing the threat or seeking evidence, the company removed all bottles of Tylenol off store shelves throughout the country, more than 31 million bottles. It ceased promoting it, educated people via the media, and collaborated with authorities and Food and Drug Administration departments. The decision to move cost over $100 million, but it set the example of how companies had to behave when there is a crisis. First things first, no exceptions. Less than a year later, Tylenol was back on the shelves in new Tampa. Evident, triple-sealed packages, and forever transformed the pharmaceutical industry. But the probe had just started. Beloved, this fact was repeatedly chased by thousands of leads and hundreds of tips, and even practical jokers took credit. A lead that was the most promising was a ransom letter that was sent to Johnson & Johnson. The author ensured they pay him $1 million in order to cease the killing. James W. Lewis was later nabbed. He had been found guilty on a charge of extortion, but never had prosecutors been able to make him a strong suspect in the killings themselves. Over the decades, he was a cloud over the case, always suspected, never charged. James Lewis died in July 2023, age 76, still not admitting to ever having been the Tylenol killer. The case has never been solved. The Tylenol murders did not take people by surprise only at the family level, but also remodeled the American law. Federal Anti-Tampering Act, 1983, became a federal crime to tamper with a consumer product and was given a life sentence should death occur as a direct result of such tampering. The FDA proposed tough measures in respect to ensuring a tamper-resistant packaging. These shadowy figures are the foil seals, plastic ties, and blister packs we see today, and all have their origins in this tragedy. Each cap you twist and seal pop you break is one full of history since the Tylenol murders. With more stringent laws, there was no abatement of the mystery. Old evidence rears its head again as new technology is used to re-examine the evidence base, suggesting there may be more truth in an old murder. The FBI examined store tills, supply tracks, and bottle batch numbers. But there were no fingerprints, no uproarious DNA, no surveillance videos, and no confessions that pinned a hand to the crime. In 1982, there were few surveillance cameras. Packaging could be opened easily, and records were few. The killer found the weak points of the epic as the most powerful weapons. The killings created fear and multiples of imitators. The news of poisoned products found their way in the country. Most of them were a hoax, but some were not. Every new case came to refresh the horror that any simple purchase would turn to a deadly experience. Product tampering was no longer unimaginable. It was even a possibility that changed how Americans shopped, medicated, and trusted everyday products. And the most amazing section of this case is the human toll. One day, 3 members of the Janus family were killed. In this picture, the last moments of Paula Prince can still be seen, and this stills the investigators. They were not merely victims of an unknown and unable to solve the mystery, but they were sons, daughters, siblings, and parents whose livelihood was robbed. Their absence is felt as a poorly written sentence and leaves families with grief but no justice. So what happened to Ceres? The case has not been solved. The solution is to be found in the ideal ingenuity of the crime. The capsules also opened and reclosed easily. Cyanide left devastating internal results, but virtually nothing on the packaging. The most probable place of tampering is around shops, making the tracking of which bottle was handled by whom almost impossible. In a time when promiscuous surveillance cameras and computerized records were not commonplace, the trail quickly grew cold soon after it started. Decades later, James Lewis still continues to be in the crosshairs with the same tune. But this is just suspicion and not evidence. He might have been a con man and an opportunist, but no evidence linking him to the bottles of poison in order to trigger murder charges could have been produced by the prosecutors. His death in 2023 ended one thread, but left the central mystery unfathomed. The Tylenol killer is a mystery, a phantasm that found a way to produce through a murderous use of good faith and vanish. However, America never would be the same after the murders. They made companies think first and foremost about consumer safety, got politicians to stop unwarranted legal loopholes, and gave the citizenry a lesson in not to overlook broken seals and suspect packaging. There is some justice in the tragedy given that it averted the deaths of hundreds of thousands because of the changes that were ushered forth. However, do not be fooled, as this is a case that still sends a chill up the spine to this day. It hangs there because it never offered a closure to us. It has dragged on because it also demonstrated how vulnerable trust can be. It hovers since somewhere out there, somebody committed the ideal crime, the one which has left them to disappear into the ether. 4 decades later, the reverberation rings out in every drugstore. Look at the seal, trust your instinct, and say the 7 who lost their lives. The Tylenol killings were not only a crime, they were a national accounting one that has transformed the way we live, shop, and protect ourselves to this day. The Tylenol cold cases are one of the most hideous unsolved crimes in the American history. 7 lives engulfed, millions cowed, and a nation transformed. It is through this disaster that we have come up with all the safeguards we see today, including tamper-proof seals and federal laws issued to counteract this tragedy. Yet behind every safety precaution, there is the haunting possibility that a safety precaution was taken, because there is someone unknown, unaccounted, and possibly watching on as we continue to desperately seek some answers. What do you think? Was it done by a single lone wolf opportunist? Or by a cold and calculating murderer, knowing how to make himself disappear, leaving no footprints? There may be no end to the Tylenol murders, but this should keep the discussion going.